Gaming Bolt presents the top 15 most awful DLCs in video games that tried to rip you off. DLC isn't the greatest practice out there. Sure, sometimes it can add real value to the game, but a lot of the time it just asks for too much money for too little value. Here are the 15 most awful pieces of DLC in video games that tried to rip you off. Asura's Wrath Actual Ending. Asura's Wrath doesn't have much gameplay to speak of, but it does have a story to tell. Too bad the developers decided to lock the game's actual ending behind DLC. If players wanted to witness a thrilling conclusion to the main character's killing spree, they had to wait and then pay. It was an insult to everyone who supported the game. Street Fighter 4 Costume Packs on Disc. On disc, DLC was a problem a couple of years ago. Why should players need to pay for extra content that is already on the disc they brought? There shouldn't be an unlocking fee, but Street Fighter 4 did just that with all of its DLC costume packs. It just came off as a cash grab from Capcom, and players were not too enthused about it. Sonic Adventures DX Upgrade. There were two versions of Sonic Adventure released back in the day, the original game and Sonic Adventure DX. The latter was an upgraded version that came with an added mission mode. When the game eventually got released on Xbox 360 and PS3, the DX modes were curiously absent. Instead, players had to pay to upgrade their game, which some argue is not even worth the money or trouble. The Amazing SpiderMan OSPhone Games. While Spider-Man spends the majority of his time swinging high above the bustling streets of New York, even he needs some downtime. Too bad players have to pay to experience this interesting snippet of the game. The OSPhone games, bite-sized titles that offer up tower defense and arcade action, don't come packed in with the title, as one might expect. You instead need to reach into your wallet to take a crack at these mediocre distractions. The Saboteur Paid Nipples. The Saboteur's witty Irish rogue takes shelter in a club. The women who work at the establishment generally cover their nipples, but if you pay $3, then you can see what lies underneath. It is an incredibly awful piece of DLC and should not be something you ask people to pay for. Dragon Age Origins Conversation Microtransactions. Interacting with characters to learn about the world and pick up quests is the bread and butter of the Dragon Age series. So it came as a major bummer when, in some conversations, missions would pop up that could only be accessed through DLC. You had to pay to embark on these miniature adventures that didn't add much to the experience. Resident Evil 5 Versus Mode. In recent years, Resident Evil has added Mercenary Mode. It's essentially a horde mode where players work together to mow down throngs of zombies and survive as long as they can. For Resident Evil 5, Capcom adapted the mode into competitive multiplayer and then released it as a paid DLC. Bottom line, developers shouldn't charge players for new game modes. Borderlands Mad Moxxi Underdome Riot. Gunning down baddies and hunting down rare weapons is thrilling in Borderlands. Most of the DLC packs added extra campaigns, offering up new areas to explore and new quests to take on. Mad Moxxi's Underdome Riot looked like it was poised to shed light on one of the game's most interesting characters, but instead it just added a lackluster horde mode to a game that succeeded at giving players plenty of interesting environments to explore. Sims 4 Stuff Packs. Every new iteration of The Sims adds plenty of new features and wacky hijinks to get up to, but the stuff packs in Sims 4 were just paid cosmetic additions. Ever wanted your Sims to have fancy new hats? Well, you're in luck, but it'll cost you. So you might be better off just playing the main game. Metro Last Light Ranger Mode. Multiple difficulties add plenty of replayability to games, but having to pay just to take on harder enemies is just silly. The sad part is that Ranger Mode isn't much more difficult than the hardest difficulty that ships with the game. The developers should have just added this to the game for free, to be honest. Mass Effect 3's Day 1 Prothean Squadmate. The conclusion to BioWare's incredible space opera was highly anticipated by millions. There was dozens of hours of gameplay to dive into, but there was also a piece of Day 1 DLC that added a lot to the game. Being able to add a Prothean soldier to your party changed gameplay and added new, exciting missions that fleshed out the past of the universe. But sadly, you had to pay for it if you wanted to experience it the same day the game launched. Call of Duty Map Packs. Every Call of Duty map pack sells for $15, but they rarely include 5 all-new maps. The redone versions of classic maps were highly anticipated by fans, but never lived up to the originals. The series has got better with DLC, but the Modern Warfare 2 era was disappointing. Oblivion Horse Armor Pack. The one that started it all. This infamous piece of DLC charged players a couple of bucks just to drape their horse in some underwhelming armour in Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. It was an absolutely pointless addition to the game, not even granting the player any benefits. Sure, your horse can survive a tussle a bit better, but it really wasn't worth it in the end. The Battlefield 3 and 4 Ultimate Shortcut Pack. Battlefield 3 and 4 both featured the same horrible bit of DLC. Players could spend $40 in order to unlock everything the game had to offer. This included every single gun and piece of equipment. It was the beginning of play-to-win economy, letting players who paid get ahead of those who had to play countless hours to earn just a fraction of what the game offered. Street Fighter X, Tekken, 12 characters. A fighting game relies on its mechanics and characters. The mechanics in Street Fighter vs Tekken were sound, but too bad that the majority of the roster was locked behind a paywall. It included some top-tier brawlers from both series, which added a lot to the game that many considered underwhelming. But sadly, players were forced to throw down cash if they wanted to get more out of this highly anticipated fighter.
And that wraps it up. What are your thoughts about this? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and share it on Twitter and Facebook. And why not consider subscribing? We upload some really cool videos almost every day. Thank you for watching this video, and happy gaming!